Folks, welcome back to So Bad It's Good, presented by Betches Media. Today, this is a breath of fresh air for me. I am so locked into reality shows right now, and it is so great to break out of that and talk about general love of pop culture and what it means to me and other people. And also, I got this email a while back, and I thought it was a prank email because I was like, this person is just cold emailing me out of the blue, and it turns out they have this amazing list of credits. Our guest today, he's the director and also writer on certain episodes of a series that I loved on CNN called History of the Sitcom. But this man has done it all. He literally has just been nominated for the version of like the Canadian Emmys. He just got nominated for, I believe it's called The Dark Side of Comedy, that is on Vice. But his IMDb, his resume is littered with things that I have watched throughout my years, but there is this certain spotlight that is put on pop culture. I mean, he even did the history of game shows for ABC, but then when I started researching him a little bit, there were so many nuggets of information that I was like, oh, I just want to talk to him about this. I want to talk to him about this. So let's get into this. Because I also, he has a new podcast out called Prison Sentences, which these are little bite-sized podcasts where he literally tries to become pen pals with people like John Gotti or people like Betty Broderick and see if they write back. But they're so bite-sized. It's like a nice little refreshing aperitif, if you will. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest today, Marshall J. Kaplan. Marshall, thank you so much for being here.
Well, the pleasure's all yours. I just want to know, you're filming me, right? Like, I just want to make sure I'm on camera.
I am filming of you. If you
okay, because I showered for this, Ryan.
Perfect.
I just want you to know.
I didn't, Marshall. So that
perfect.
We started off good.
We balance each other. Go ahead.
Okay, let's start. So you just told me before we started, you just got nominated last week. Was it Canadian Emmy or what was it? You got nominated?
What we do here, we don't have the Oscars and the Emmys. What they do is they consolidated both our film and television into the Canadian Screen Awards. So I woke up and someone texted me and they said, congrats on your nomination. And I got nominated for Best Director in a Factual Series. And that was for The Dark Side of Comedy for Vice for the Joan Rivers episode, which was awesome. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Joan Rivers, and I was just, we all watched the Oscars this past weekend, and Joan Rivers was so brilliant on the red carpet of these award shows, and then the Fashion Police episodes, which even my parents, weirdly enough, don't really follow tons of pop culture, but they would watch Fashion Police. They loved Joan Rivers, and I think it's so amazing that her legend continues to grow even in the afterlife. When you do a piece like that, when you're directing a piece like that, how do you approach a factual docuseries, if you will?
Well, basically, you have your team of story producers and they'd all do the research of the episode, right? And then I go out in the field and the Joan Rivers episode was an episode I pitched to Vice, which got approved because I felt we should do an episode on her dark side, which was the plastic surgery. What happens is we do our research on it. I then choose who I feel should be interviewed for it. I got Pamela Adlon. I got George Schlatter, who discovered her from Laugh-In, right? And anyways, I go out there with the beats we want to cover, make sure we get these nuggets to tell the story. But if anything else comes out of that interview, let it roll, because sometimes whatever you get in addition to the story is better than the story. So I go in there kind of with my beats. And the way I do my interviews, which I love doing, is you sit with 2 hours with these people and just have a conversation.
Yeah.
And versus asking question, get an answer. That's too boring.
That's the thing sometimes, is that you want to be prepared enough so you can actually be loose enough to let whatever happens. In the course of doing the Joan Rivers episode in particular, were there any detours that were discovered in the interview process that was like, oh, that's amazing?
I didn't really know the history between George Schlatter and her. And I thought that, because I was such a fan of Laugh-In. And when I kind of found out that George was involved, I gave his office a call, got the interview, and it was, George Schlatter, which I found was really cool. What he did is the reason why he sort of brought her to the forefront and gave her first television break was because that's what he did with female comedians. They weren't on television. So he would get people like Ruth Buzzy and Joanne Worley and Judy Carn and Goldie Hawn, because you didn't see female comedians. So he was he really was the forerunner in getting female comedians on television.
I mean, which is truly amazing, but also Joan Rivers is fascinating because she had a series of men in her life like that. Johnny Carson was another one of those men, waved her over. She was then a guest host when Johnny, to fill in for Johnny, and their relationship infamously broke up when she did the Joan Rivers show for Fox, and Johnny never talked to her again for the rest of her life. But it is interesting, like the dark side of comedy, I didn't even realize you were a part of that. And there is so much dark side to comedy, but your head must be spinning because you work on the history of sitcom, and that directly spills into the dark side of comedy, I would imagine. The history of sitcom, I remember, like I DVR'd that, like I geeked out on that thing so hard.
Thank you. Thanks.
But how do you, I mean, this is like your approach to things. How do you encapsulate the history of sitcom in the world into an 8-episode series on CNN?
It's a lot of stuff on the floor. It's a lot of stuff you have to edit because you could sit, I'm like you, I'm a geek, right? And you're sitting there with, I think one of my favorite interviews, anyways, I'll tell you after, but you're sitting with these people and you want to know so much, but you only can say, I'm interviewing you about God, or I'm interviewing you about good times, but I want to know so much more. And so many great moments are left on the floor. It's a shame. It's a shame.
But doing what you get to do, you get that pleasure button hit for you, not for the audience, because you get to know all of these things. They're all in your head. Like, that's what I love about pop culture is it's an individual experience that we get to collect these amazing pieces of information. And then hopefully we get to share them with strangers or start a conversation that gives you a secret language between you and other pop culture lovers. Let's get back to like how you started with all this, because I was reading this where you started doing celebrity caricatures at the age of 7, like Charlie Chaplin, Groucho Marx, you know, all of these things. And what really hit me, by the way, you guys, this gentleman has a Wikipedia page, for the love of God. This is when you know you made it, when somebody has a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, apparently that's if you made it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I listen, I think you made it. So, but you know, they compared your style of caricature being greatly influenced by a gentleman named Al Hirschfeld. And Al Hirschfeld, if you guys don't know, he would do these caricatures in the New York Times. It would be Broadway stars, luminaries of stage and screen, and he would hide little things called Ninas, and I believe that was his daughter's name. And it would put like 3 or 5, so you would be looking for the Ninas in these really complex caricatures. And my acting teacher in college, Marshall Mason, he made us read the New York Times every week to try to get us like into that frame of mind. And the caricatures, the Al Hirschfeld, it turned out to be my favorite part of the weekend of trying to find these Ninas. And you actually got to meet the man. Is that true? Like,
correct.
A little bit of a mentor situation.
Yes. I don't, you never know why you grasp onto pop culture or celebrities. You never know. At 7 years old, I don't know why, but I started to draw caricatures. And then when I turned, I think 14, my uncle bought me a book, and I've got, I don't know if you can see behind me, there's a few books stacked up there, and they're Hirschfeld books. They're about his artwork. And he bought me the top one. And when I saw that, I had never seen caricatures done that way. And I was hooked. And I started to emulate his way of drawing because I was just so amazed by what he did. And then I started to write to him as a teenager, maybe 18, 19 years old. And I started to share my caricatures with him. And eventually I was invited down to New York. I think I was 24, 25, got to meet him. I did a caricature of him for him. I got to see his
ballsy. That's really ballsy.
It is ballsy. Yeah. And, but it was more out of love. It was out of love than balls, right? Well, the two are combined. But, anyways, I was so honored to be able to correspond with him, send him my artwork that he could take a look at, eventually meet the man, see all of his original stuff in his studio hidden, behind, I can't tell you. I have one of his pieces. I've got Audrey Hepburn in my living room, actually. And I've got, these books are signed from him. I've got a letter from him.
Wow.
So I was in New York last week and saw a play at the Al Hirschfeld Theater. And it's every time like that happens, I just get very, my heart just is so warmed by that. Yeah.
I read that name and it immediately just like it's wistful for a time that I used to like just remembering the salad days, if you will. But then the other story that I was reading in this that I was blown away by, it was like 1987. You're on a flight from Toronto to Los Angeles, and the legend B. Arthur from Golden Girls, and she's on the flight, and you happen to show her, if this is true, caricature of the Golden Girls. Is that correct?
100% true. Just a bit of a nugget for you. In Canada, we have a pharmacy chain called Shoppers Drug Mart. When Maude ended and she didn't have any shows going on, she got this long-term contract to be the spokesperson for this pharmacy, honest to God. And then the Golden Girls happened, but she was still locked in this pharmacy. So she's schlepping up to Toronto to do these commercials and going back to LA. And I was flying down to LA to shuck my wares, and I always carried my portfolio with a bunch of caricatures in it. And lo and behold, the Golden Girls caricature was in there. I go up to B and I say to her, I've got something I would love to show you. She goes, after we take off, come to my seat. I was in economy. She was in first class. I came to first class. There was an empty seat next to her. She had me sit down with her. We went through the whole portfolio. She loved the Golden Girls caricature. I ended up drawing a second one for the Whit Thomas Harris production offices that were hung there. And
she commissioned work from you at that point.
Yeah, and all four Golden Girls signed the caricature for me as well. Am I allowed to swear on this? I think I can swear on this.
You can
podcast.
totally.
Okay,
shit. Yeah.
So the best part of that thing was, the flight attendant wanted me to leave the seat. B. Arthur told me he's not leaving. I told her I'm not leaving. Anyways, we're going through my portfolio. And as we're going through every caricature, there's one of Betty Davis. And B. Arthur goes, "This woman is a cunt." And that's even better than the Golden Girls story.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
so apparently Betty Davis, everybody saw her next Tuesday. Yeah.
I love that. So, I mean, so you have this path that you're on, and the caricatures, and you're meeting people through that.
Yeah.
But then how does it pivot into production? How does it pivot into directing, producing, writing? Was that just a natural evolution from caricature?
No, it was, I was doing caricatures. I got very lucky, very young, and I was syndicated at age 20, and I was doing 35, 40 newspapers across Canada. And then the recession hit, and lost a lot, if not all of that work. I was like, holy shit, what am I supposed to do now? What do I do with this skill set of drawing celebrities? Nothing. So I ended up getting a job in advertising. Okay, whatever. 20 years later, I guess I'm like 40, 41. And I say I'm kind of like Peggy Lee. Is that all there is? I sort of did everything. I did everything I wanted to do. And the only thing I really ever wanted to do was to produce television. That's what I wanted. I was a kid who sat on the floor of a living room watching Hollywood Squares and Pyramid and saying, I want to be that. I want to do that.
Yeah.
And at 40, 41, I said to my wife, I want to change careers. And I kind of just I took my advertising acumen, knocked on doors of broadcasters, tried to pitch shows, and I was just pitching titles. I didn't know anything about shows. And I got a job as a story producer, and I just applied. I said, listen, I don't know anything about TV, but I've been in advertising for 20 years. And within a year, I sold a show, and then I became an executive television producer, and that all happened and got nominated for a Canadian Emmy for that. And that was all within my first year. And it was like, well, this is kind of meant to be. Yeah.
How dare you? First off, can you manage my career? My God, this is what I'm talking about. But how wild that you just the love of that passion that drives you to do that. But at 40 or 41 years old, jumping into an entire new profession.
Yeah.
I had a teacher in the past, their motto was dare to suck, just suck as bad as you can here so you can go out there in the real world. But you're not road tested. You're out there just doing it on the fly, but you have this history of your love of it. Did you find your love of it to be something in the end that completely gave you a leg up compared to other people in the industry that might just be doing it as a job, and you came from love?
I'll tell you something, not to get too deep. I'm the older I get, the older we all get, the wiser we all get. And I look at what drives a person, and it's a passion, which is really your soul. And when you're a creative person and you find that niche in you that really that's what you want to do, you will do whatever it takes to succeed because that's what you love. And a lot of people don't understand the creative industry, whether you're a painter, whether you're a musician, whether you're a television producer, is about enjoying your craft, knocking on as many doors as you can, and hopefully getting a couple breaks.
Yeah.
It's all about, years ago, this agent told me, this old time Hollywood agent said, being creative, it's luck, timing, and talent, and in that order, and that success. The most talented people may not get the breaks, but the least talented people, like me, sometimes get the breaks. But it's really following your passion. And, to change your career at 41, it's like I decided that's what I'm doing and went after it. And it kind of all came together.
Was that a tough day for your wife?
Well, I didn't get sex that night, but look, I left a pretty decent job to say to her. And she said to me, you know what, Marshall, listen, you didn't know anything about advertising. You lost all of your syndication work and you succeeded in that. I have no doubt you'll succeed in this as well. And that was it. And it was really the first year was just living off a line of credit, doing what you can do. Yeah.
And then you see actually it can happen. Things are moving in this certain direction. But as a kid and then, even into your 40s, what were you drawn to in terms of pop culture? What were the things that made you buzz?
Oh God, it's just the celebritydom. The celebritydom, is that even a word? It's
sure,
just
let's make it a word. Yeah,
I think the whole part of the caricature thing was this: how can a kid? Where are you based, Ryan? Where are you?
Los Angeles.
Okay, you're in LA. So I'm in Toronto. Okay, I came from a middle-class suburb of Toronto. I was a kid with no chance of ever saying, I'll meet Sherwood Schwartz or Norman Lear or Mel Brooks. But I love them. So I drew caricatures. That was my way to connect to them. And as I got older, I started to mail them the caricature and get their signature. Okay, now I've connected. I got their signature. They held this, right? And then it's like to meet the people that I sat on a floor in Toronto, never thinking in my entire life, never mind meet them. I'd work with them. I'd spend time with them. So it was the drive of just, I don't know, there's this love of celebrity.
Well, that's
that
it exactly.
In my living room, I
mean, I'm in Los Angeles now, but I grew up in a small Olathe, Kansas, and I would sit there watch.
There you go.
I would bet Entertainment Tonight was appointment television to think that there was a place called Hollywood that was so far away from Kansas that I didn't think I could ever gain entry to. I didn't realize you could just go. I thought you had to be some kind of magical person to be able to. And that's why even in the down days, I'll see that Hollywood sign and it'll still, or I'll drive down Sunset Boulevard and think about how many historical pieces of pop culture or celebritydom, even horrific things River Phoenix died at the Viper Room, right? Outside, you'll see this history of Hollywood, and that's the stuff that that kid in Kansas, would be blown away that he, I am here right now. But not only celebrity though, did you fall in love with the actual material that Hollywood was producing itself, or was it more just celebrity driven?
Look, anything that was pop culture that I was a kid, we had 3 channels years ago. Okay. And you watched everything in your living room with your family. It was a family event. And there was no reruns. There were reruns. There was no VHS. There was no streaming. There was no whatever. If you missed a show, you were fucked. And so people like our generation, like you said earlier, pop culture is a language that's embedded in our heads, right? If I'm watching Welcome Back, Kotter, I'm absorbing so much of that shit because I don't know when I'm going to see that episode again. So then I would go out and buy the Welcome Back, Kotter, bubblegum cards or the lunch boxes or the t-shirts and because you don't know when you're going to see that shit again, right?
Yeah.
All of that 30-minute sitcom or whatever it may be was embedded in your psyche, embedded in your home, embedded in your lifestyle.
Yeah. And this is jumping ahead a little bit, but the question is, I do long for those days of, the simplicity of having just a finite amount of stations. And now it keeps growing. It keeps growing. We've now thrown social media onto it. TikTok is now kids' favorite station to watch in certain areas. Where are we headed? The history of sitcom, I was thinking about, you will not be able to potentially do a show like that 20 years from now because it would be impossible. And all our attention spans are in so many different directions. Does that make you sad in a way? Where do you see all this headed?
Yeah, I can't tell you, Ryan. It makes me so sad. And I'm in the industry. It makes me really sad. Nobody will ever, the difference is now these TikTokers and whatever streamers, their fame skyrockets very quickly, but their longevity is much shorter. So they're in it for a minute, man. And Whereas people like Jackie Gleason or Lucille Ball, they had 30, 40-year careers in our living rooms. Okay. We knew these people. They were on magazine. No one's going to have magazines anymore, but it is sad because number one, we're disconnected as a society. We all watch our shit on our own. Nobody sits together as a family and watches series. I watch, even with my wife, she's watching her shit, I'm watching my shit. But we do watch The Housewives together. That we do.
Hey, okay, good. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second.
That we do. But it's really sad because there will never be levels of stardom anymore. Like I watch the Oscars and I'd be like, who the fuck are those people? Who's sitting in the front row? I don't even know this person. I don't know the artist. I don't know. I feel so disconnected and it makes me very sad because I don't have the love as much as I had when I was a kid.
And also the mystery has disappeared in some ways of you would follow a celebrity and there was something about like you're doing almost like an archaeological dig on trying to find pieces of information. But now the pieces of information are so accessible that the mystery, like, we didn't know what our favorite movie stars and TV stars were really doing, except that maybe, you'd get a little blurb or a little like behind the scenes photograph from a paparazzi, but now it's everywhere. I was looking at the Oscars as well. And I have this conversation a lot with the audience about the last movie star, and can we consider Timothée Chalamet to potentially be the great hope right now in terms of a actual Tom Cruise-ish kind of figure? Because right now, like you said, we don't know. I've given up almost on knowing everybody. I used to think that I could watch every film, every TV show, and I would be so proud every Sunday looking through the TV guide and crossing off what I had seen and what I hadn't.
Do you do that, Ron? Do you do that? I do that all the time. You don't know, dude.
It was like I was so proud. I used to get the Roger Ebert big book of like compendium of movies, and I would get it every year, and then I would circle the ones I wanted. And this is before you had access. Like I would have to go to the library or Blockbuster Video and try to get like Kurosawa films and things like that just to like keep up. And then you one day realize like, oh, well, a lot of these films are I don't know if I literally need to see Steven Seagal films. Like I get it already, like I'm not going to see every one of those. But it gets me excited, but it also gets me sad because the thing that really drove me as a young adult into my adulthood is vanishing in some ways. But is there a positive spin that we can put on this and say, or you want to appreciate the love of like a youthful audience? You want to appreciate or try to see what they're seeing. But sometimes I just don't know. Like you said, like I don't see a breadth of a career with any of these people.
No, I think it's interesting you brought up Timothée Chalamet. I truly think that Tom Cruise is the last movie star. That's my opinion. When I saw the last Mission Impossible, the one with the train, I thought he's the last movie star. Timothée Chalamet, I think, is cannibalizing himself, to be honest with you. I think it's like, let's put Timothée Chalamet in everything. It's like, it's enough.
His head must be spinning. He's like, he's got so many offers right now.
And like, he's a good actor, but it's more about his look. I don't know. He has that impish. Anyways, I just feel it's too much of him already. It's like, to me, the greatest movie stars to me are starting to fade out. The Meryl Streeps,
I know.
I like that Jodie Foster's coming back. I like seeing her again.
But by the way, coming back on serialized television. True Detective, which I thought I really enjoyed watching that. And has it been interesting for you to watch how like TV has turned into the new movies? Is that it's able to tell a longer story?
I don't like that.
You don't like that?
I like going to the theater. I like sitting in the dark. Like I remember years ago, you would see a horror film like When a Stranger Calls or something like that. And the whole audience would be jump at the same time, scream at the same time. And now you're sitting in your living room, you're putting a pause, you want to go get something to eat. Like it's not the same.
Well, and now when we do go to the theater, it's either usually for a Marvel movie. We're worried about coughing. We're worried, if anything, that's why I think it's interesting. Like, Nicole Kidman should be doing AMC commercials, whatever gets us talking about the theater experience, whatever gets us, put concerts in there. I don't care. I just don't want this to go away. I used to rant about this all the time of just the magic of the movies. And then you start to realize, Christopher Nolan gave a speech on his Oscars, like we're only 100 years into this industry in terms of film. Where are we going to go? But part of that is there is change, but I don't want the theater going experience to disappear or only be made for films like Oppenheimer or Black Panther.
Yeah, you know what? We're cut from the same cloth, Ryan. When you said about the magic of the movies to me is missing, and I feel that even watching Oscars, I'm still a kid. I like to watch Oscars. I sit there and I write down who I think is going to
Yeah.
win, still to this day. But I feel the Oscars are run by PR departments now. It's all public relations. Who's going to present? You know, years ago they'd say, "Oh, here's coming up is Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds," and they'd all come out together to present something. There was movie history. They gave out an honorary Oscar to Mel Brooks, not at the Oscars, at a
I know, isn't
luncheon.
that wild?
They used to bring out these old people, and everyone would applaud,
Oh,
and
when Charlie Chaplin, I mean, this is before my time, but
right,
Charlie
right, when they let
Chaplin
him come back, right?
to receive this special award after he had to leave Hollywood.
Yes,
And it
yeah,
was this really emotional moment that everybody stood up and he felt like he was loved again. And there's these stories. By the way, you guys, there's a book I read last year called Oscar Wars about the whole history of the Oscars that I highly
yeah,
recommend. But those are those moments, and they
yeah,
almost get shelved because it's not selling enough soap. You know, you're
right,
not getting the advertising dollars, or it's not sexy enough when
right,
I think it is. That's why work that you're doing right now is so important. Dark side of comedy, history of sitcom, so we can actually show people why these
yeah,
things deserve to have a second, a third look. We need to get
yes.
younger audiences into the appreciation of a written joke in terms of the multicam sitcom, which is for most, like all intents and purposes,
Hmm.
disappeared.
Yeah, yeah. You know what's really interesting? Not interesting. What actually pisses me off? It pisses me off the younger generation, and I feel like such an old fucking fart. The younger generation who gets into this business, they want to be a director, they want to be an editor, but they know sweet fuck all about how this industry started, or the greatest films of all time, or they don't know who Orson Welles is, or they don't know
Oh,
Chaplin. It's like, I'm sorry, you can't work in this industry if you haven't had the history. You
well,
can't
well,
do
then
that.
because they watch now I sound like an old fart because then they watch a film and they don't
Yeah.
realize that it's been cannibalized from something much earlier. Like I remember, I'm trying to think which film it was, but I was like, well, yeah, All the President's Men is the one that actually literally did that for the first time and told
Yes.
this story about intrigue in Washington and
Yeah.
all of this stuff. And you're like, but it's so funny because kids don't have that language to realize it's an homage. It's like building
Are you talking
upon
about
an already.
Spotlight? Are you talking about Spotlight?
I am actually, yeah.
Yeah, that was the one. Right. Exactly. It's All the President's Men with a
Yeah.
newer cast.
Which is great. I love Michael Keaton. I love all of that stuff, but
Yeah.
people don't realize this isn't like they didn't invent the wheel with Spotlight. This is a well-tread formula that is, if you do it well, it sings. But I don't know. I find that really interesting. Now I'm thinking though, I keep thinking about your cutting room floor
Yeah.
comment. There needs to be a docuseries that you do just called Cutting Room Floor, and every little
Seriously.
tidbit that left on the floor, and take us through the history of these little peculiar stories that you learn throughout. I mean, because I could talk to you for hours. Like, I mean, you such a wealth of information. Before we get back to some more, well, we're going to get to a nerdy thing right here and get
A
back to
nerdy
other
thing.
nerdy stuff.
Okay. Go
You
ahead with the
also
nerdy.
wrote
Yeah.
that you have a huge pop culture memorabilia
Oh my God. You don't even want to know.
collection. Is that
Yeah.
is that true?
Yeah, you don't even want to know. Like
What do you have?
as my wife calls it, junk that when you die, the kids don't want. You got to get rid of it. I have like even in my okay, so my office that we're sitting in, every piece of furniture here is from the '60s. I don't know if you could. There's this great radio turntable
yeah.
there. My chair. I've got those little telephone tables over there. See over there.
Oh,
And see the
yeah.
cool dial phone. Do you see the red,
Yeah,
yellow, and
of
black,
course.
orange and black? I've got a cool TV from the '50s. Right. You see what I've got
Oh my
happening?
God.
So that's just furniture. Downstairs in my basement, I've got scripts from the Lucy Show. I don't know, a taxi. I don't. I don't even know. I've got toys from I bought back all the toys from my childhood. All the
Yeah.
board games I
Yes.
used to play with. I've got my Spirograph. I've got Battleship. I've got Big Jim and his camper. I can't even tell you the shit I got downstairs. And it's
No.
it's warm and fuzzy. It's warm and fuzzy shit that makes me feel good.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I mean, you answered it, but that was my next question is like, why do we do like I chase down these things sometimes, and
Yeah.
then if I go through like I went through a divorce a long time ago, and I realized when I was looking at this collection of stuff that I had, that how like at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything, and you almost had to work your way up to where these things mean something again, because
Yeah.
you know that you can, lose everything in a moment, if that makes sense. But it's like I used to track down, like, we're from like a hair of a different generation, like the Knight Rider car
Oh, yeah.
that David
Yeah.
Hasselhoff drew.
Yes.
I had that toy as a kid, and when I was able to get it on eBay, the amount of joy it brought me holding that in my hand
See?
and connecting
Yeah.
it with a piece of childhood. And it's weird. Like, I have so much of like just Batman paraphernalia that I was
Yes.
like, I don't have a kid. Like, where does this
And is it
legitimately go?
It's the Adam West Batman?
I have I have the Adam West, the Michael Keaton, I collected Batman through the different iterations.
Okay,
And
so I was able to sit with George Barris in the actual Batmobile.
Batmobile creator.
I have a great photo of me and him in the actual Batmobile, which is cool. And Adam, have you ever met Adam? Did you ever meet Adam?
No, man, God, I would have freaked out.
You would have loved him. He was probably the greatest interview I ever had. He was the funniest man I ever met. And nicest.
Guys, if you don't know,
kindest.
Adam West played the initial Batman in the TV series from the 60s. That was legendary at the time. It was like pop art dream. It was just incredible. I have the whole series on Blu-ray DVD if you ever want to borrow it, guys. So, I mean, you got to that's it though. Like, we're chasing this good feeling from our youth. Are there new things that give you that same feeling that you had as a kid? Like new pieces of pop culture that give you that same, button push?
No, which is,
no.
I could probably, I'm just saying, and I don't mean to be like an ass. I just don't get that thrill anymore. I have an appreciation for the art. I have an appreciation for the film. I don't walk out there like I want to buy the t-shirt. I don't walk out, I want to buy the merchandise. No, I really, it's a shame. I don't. I still love the craft. But I don't have that pop culture language with it anymore. Like, and I feel like even the only real pop culture I feel out there right now is the Marvel, right? Because there's the Marvel films, and truly they're just a merchandising empire is what they are.
Yeah.
Because that's why they do those films. Because at the end of the day,
I just read this book on Marvel. Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, the Marvel thing, and it's like blatant. Like, if they didn't, there's like this book about the history of Marvel, and it talked about like if they didn't sell enough toys, it almost like we got to rearrange how we're doing these movies.
Right? Exactly. So that's sad. I think that's kind of sad because the toy and the pop culture, all the items that come out of a TV show should be because the show was a success, not the other way around.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's weird. Yeah. Okay. So, when you started working in this industry, did a little bit more of the magic disappear because you actually saw how the sausage was made?
No, because working in the industry, I was just grateful. I was grateful in my 40s to be able to be part of something I wanted to do as a kid. And then as I've gotten older, there's certain times I have my pinch myself moments, and like even though I'm in Toronto, I do a lot of work in LA. I do a lot of work in New York. The LA, my days off from a shoot, I'll rent a car and I go to fucking, I'm an idiot. I go to this is where, this is the Cunningham house. And I go to, and I take pictures. I take selfies in front of I go to cemeteries and I see where famous.
God. You've been to that one in Westwood with Marilyn Monroe and Hugh Hefner next to each other, and Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau
next to each other, Billy Wilder. They're all there.
Oh, it's wild. And by the way, you guys, it's in like the heart of Westwood. Like, you would never think this cemetery was there.
It's a weird entrance too. It's this tiny little entrance. Don Knotts is there.
Have you ever seen a movie at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery? They do the cemetery
but I've heard
screenings.
About those are supposed to be really cool.
That's wild too, because Alfred Hitchcock is buried there.
Yeah.
Joey Ramone, Chris Cornell. I mean, and it's so weird that they do these beautiful screenings of film during the summer, but it's kind of a little morbid. Like, just wondering if we're disturbing the peace of all these celebrities, or if they love it.
Part of me thinks they'd appreciate it. My wife would laugh that I tell her I'm going to a cemetery, and then she came out to LA while I was filming, and I said, we're going to a cemetery. And I schlepped her to the cemetery. She goes, actually, it's quite beautiful here to walk around. I go, yes, it's amazing,
Yeah. Forest Lawn is another great cemetery as well, you guys, if you're ever over in the Glendale area. Okay, so what are you I mean, we have Prison Sentences, which is a podcast. You guys, it's so bite-sized. You're going to love it. It's really quick, funny. I mean, what even gave you the idea of writing to prisoners to try to be prison pen pals?
Okay, so I thought of a book because I've written to celebrities for so many years and had them sign caricatures of me. I don't know where saw the term prison sentences, but I just saw it and my creative mind said, oh, prison and sentences, writing letters. So I said, what if I write letters to these criminals and make a book? And my son, my second oldest, said, Dad, why don't you do a podcast? You're funny. Why don't you make this into a comedy? And I said, do you think it's proper to do comedy and crime? Like, it's kind of like
Yeah.
sacrilege, right? And he said, no, just write them stupid letters. So I write the stupidest letters I could think of. I never mentioned the crime, never talk about the crime. And there's like, okay, BTK, who wrote me, BTK, bound, torture, kill.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I know.
So I wrote him,
Yeah.
and I write them
my
letters like,
God.
oh, I found out BTK worked for the Coleman company that makes camping equipment. So I wrote him a letter. I'm like, hi, BTK. What did you do at Coleman? And what kind of camping equipment? And did you ever like to go camping? And he wrote me this whole letter back about camping. So
the
I think that's
BTK
kinda cool.
killer wrote you a whole letter back about camping equipment?
Yeah, he liked to go camping with his family and tell scary stories. And he made like coolers. And I'm like, oh, okay. But it's like, it's so morbidly funny and cool that you gotta, the podcast, I read the letter I wrote to them and then the letter
Well,
they
you
wrote
also
back.
you give a history of the person. Like you gave a history of Betty
Short.
Broderick,
Yeah,
of,
very
her
short,
crimes.
yeah.
Very short. Like this is like, I'm talking 5 minutes. I was like, there's no way you can get this in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But, also you wrote to Betty Broderick about Tupperware because,
I wrote to Betty Broderick. She sold Tupperware to fund the husband's legal career that she killed. I wrote to Pamela Smart. I wrote to John Gotti years ago. Charles Manson, I wrote to him. I did a caricature of Charles Manson and John Gotti. I wanted to know what they thought of it. So I sent it to them and they wrote me back.
Well, that's it. Well, yeah, we can talk about that on this show as well. It's like pop culture is not just TV and film anymore.
Right.
It's true crime.
True crime is definitely pop
now
culture.
pop culture, which
Yeah.
I think is so weird and interesting. And sometimes you're so desensitized where it has entered this pop culture language. And so it is that weird, like you were talking about earlier, of like treating it respectfully or can we pull humor from something this dark?
Yeah. The biggest thing I had with my boys, as I said to them, they said to me, actually, do not make fun of the victim in the podcast.
Oh, God, no, yeah.
Do not make a joke about the victim. You can make a joke about the criminal because they're pieces of shit, a lot of them, but don't make fun of maybe just the whole concept of what went on here. So there is this dad humor in it. But yeah, like, for example, you said about pop culture, Gypsy Blanchard.
Huge, right? She all of a sudden exploded on it. She's getting up to Kardashian levels on Instagram all of a sudden. And I thought, how wild that we have now made her internet famous. She participated in a very grisly, dark crime. Oh, I think you cut out for a sec. Can you hear me?
Yes. And people are buying tons of.
Oh,
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can totally hear you. Yeah. I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're breaking up a bit on my end, but as long as
yeah, you keep going,
right?
So the technology
Blanchard
will still record this. Okay, am I back?
Okay, Gypsy Blanchard, you're back. Yeah, I see you.
Okay,
are you okay?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can totally hear you.
Okay, Gypsy Blanchard. Okay, Gypsy Blanchard. People are buying T-shirts, mugs, memorabilia about her. It's like she's no Lucille Ball, but yeah.
She's a star, and people are wondering what she's going to do next.
Yeah. I'll tell you what she's going to do next. She'll kill somebody next.
What are you going to do next? Like, what's the next big project that you're working on right now or something that you have in your mind of, I want to tell this story?
Right now I am... Well, when is this going to air in the next 2 days?
It's going to air in like 2 weeks.
Okay, 2 weeks. That's fine. There's a show I'm working on for A&E. It's a very easy, nice show about lakefront properties. Just got renewed for 40 episodes, which I was really happy about. So
wow.
It gets a good audience on A&E. So I'm going to be producing and directing that, which is a nice contract. Prison Sentences is 20 episodes a season. I've gotten now 75 letters back. So that's 3.5 years of podcasts on that one.
Wow.
And what else? I don't know. When you're creative, there's always things you want to do. I know I want to do a book of my celebrity caricatures and the ones that have been signed and the stories behind them, like the B. Arthur story or, the Lucille Ball story when I pretended to be a flower delivery guy and went to her house. That type of shit. Yeah.
Wow, you really put yourself out there. I mean, imagine if you had TikTok when you were a kid doing this. You would have filmed these encounters. It would have been well documented.
Totally.
Who was the meanest celebrity to you?
Oh, you want to know?
When you were growing up?
The meanest celebrity I was in person, you mean? Just in my career?
Yeah,
or what do you mean?
To you. Like who was the meanest celebrity to you personally?
Personally, Larry David.
Really?
Not even.
Why? What happened?
Not even. I need to have to think about that one.
What was the story?
He's just an asshole. Larry David is Larry David.
Was this during History of the Sitcom?
No, I interviewed him about 12, 13 years ago for another show. It was on camera. I was on camera with him. And he just was like, just a bit of a prick. And it's like, dude, you got so much money. Be nice. Be kind. You don't have to complain. He just is just him. He's just and he makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He makes you feel uncomfortable because he's so uncomfortable to be around.
Well, that's interesting too, like the History of the Sitcom, how it's like, it used to be like hard punchlines and then it like kind of shifted. Even with The Office, is the joke is the uncomfortableness. The joke is what is said in between the lines of the uncomfortable thing that Steve Carell said, the mean thing that Larry David said. It then turned from hard punchlines to reaction shots.
Right, exactly. Like you look at comedy writing has been in threes, right? You do the 1, 2, 3 punch, right? It's the 1, 2, the punch is the third.
The beat,
and then when you have Arrested Development or Parks and Recreation, like I said, in The Office, this is about mainly 1 or 2 characters that are odd, and they don't know that they're odd.
Yeah,
and the things that they're saying are perceived differently. You had a bit of that in Taxi.
Well, I mean, yeah, because you had a lot. You had the Danny DeVito, Andy Kaufman's character, Christopher Lloyd's character.
Lloyd, and Judd Hirsch was the moral compass, right?
Yeah, I always call him the reliable narrator. The reliable narrator that we relate to.
The humor, they didn't know they were being funny or odd, the rest of the people. He knew.
Yeah. I revisited Taxi a while back, and it's just still so good. Taxi holds up.
It does. Okay, can I just share a crazy story?
Please.
My family lived in Los Angeles for about 2 years in the 70s, and I lived in the Valley. My dad was trying to open up some businesses and blah, blah, blah. And I went to school, and I met this kid, and his name was Alex, and his last name was Hirsch. And this is 78. It ended up being Judd Hirsch's son. I didn't know who Judd Hirsch was because Taxi hadn't been a show yet.
Yeah.
And I was over at Alex's house and, with his dad, and we go swimming and all of this shit. Anyways, he says, my dad just got a TV show. Would you like to come to the filming of it one day? Sure. So the show had been greenlit. They did the pilot of Taxi. The show was greenlit. This was episode 7, I believe. So it hadn't aired yet. Taxi hadn't aired. Before cell phones and all this shit, I go to my mom, my parents. I go, I'm going to go to the set with Alex to see his dad. Okay. The limo picks us up at 6 a.m. We go to Paramount Studios. It was Friday. It was the day of a taping. I meet people. Alex is introducing me to people. This is my dad's boss, and it was Danny DeVito. I thought it was actually his boss. So I meet Danny DeVito and Jeff Conaway and Tony Danza and all. And I was playing around on the set of Taxi, blah, 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 go to the taping. Then we go into the after party. And I'm a kid, I'm 12, right? 12, 13. We go to this after party. So this is the best story. And it was years later, you think, holy shit, I didn't realize that. We go to this filming of this episode. I go into Judd Hirsch's car. Alex is in the front seat. Judd's in this driving. I'm in the middle. And to my right is this actress named Arlene Galanka, who was the guest star. And to my left is Andy Kaufman, who played Latka on the show. And we're driving to the after party. And and then I got home 3 a.m. My mom's like, where the fuck have you been? Anyways, Judd drops me off at home. And to this day, I have a great autograph that Judd says, we had the best day today, didn't we? And he dated everything. But it was only years later that I said, I was in the backseat of the car with Andy Kaufman at age 13. Yeah.
Yeah, God. I mean,
Yeah.
and did you? What was the set? I mean, as a 13-year-old, do you even get a sense of who that? Like, not of what he's about, but did you feel like, oh, I'm sitting next to a weird guy right now? Like, do you even get a sense as a
No,
kid?
I was honestly, I didn't. I was more thrilled that day that I got to go visit the Little House on the Prairie set on Paramount and met Michael Landon and Jack
Oh my
Albertson.
God!
Yeah, so we went, and that day, this is also really cool. So that day I went to see Laverne and Shirley rehearse because we were running around like kids on a set, right?
Holy, Laverne and Shirley
Yeah,
rehearsing?
so I was in the bleachers watching Laverne and Shirley, and who's sitting next to me in the bleachers watching them rehearse was Robin Williams, because he had just been cast as Mork on Happy
Mork.
Days.
Yes,
He hadn't yet
Happy
gotten Mork
Days
and Mindy.
led to Mork and Mindy.
Right,
yes.
but he hadn't been cast yet at Mork and Mindy. He was Mork on Happy Days. That's how I knew him. So I got his autograph while he was sitting next to me, but that was that day. Yeah.
Do you still have that autograph?
Of course I do.
That's amazing.
I keep everything, Ryan. I keep everything.
Oh, yeah. But the Andy Kaufman of it all, I had an Andy Kaufman fascination like right before Man on the Moon came out. And you guys, there's a brilliant documentary, a really weird documentary on Netflix called Andy and Me, about Jim Carrey portraying the role of Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
And he went fully method. Like Judd Hirsch, Danny DeVito, they all like played parts in the actual movie Man on the Moon. But it is, I really like the Bob Zamuda of it all. I fell in love with the history of Andy Kaufman, of just somebody like being performance art level comedy before we even knew what performance art was, and putting that onto a national show like Taxi. I mean, just having to work with somebody like that was so committed to the bit. It's another just fabulous story about Hollywood. And Marshall, you have all of them. This has gone way too fast. I hope you enjoyed your time with me. And by the way, if you ever come to Hollywood, I would love to take you to lunch. I would.
Oh my God! I was about to say, if I come down to LA again, we're going to get in a car and we're going to drive around. There's places. I'll show you shit. Like, it's just, I have the best time.
It would, like, honestly, I needed this conversation today. I've been in Housewives land, Real Housewives, and all this stuff. Oh my God. Yeah. And it's sometimes you've long for the days of just watching, just studying pop culture generally and not reality stars. And I had a feeling I was going to love this, but I didn't realize how much I would love this. So thank you so much for coming today. But
Ryan,
how do we support
awesome.
you? How do we support you and what you do? Because you do everything. I think people are going to love you.
Listen, I would love people to listen to the podcast. That's my new little project. It's just prison sentences. That's it. By me. Just they're 5 minutes an episode. You can go for a walk for an hour and listen to 12 apps. Like, it's that's my own little personal project. I'd like to see where it goes, because I think I'll do a book after that. And how do you support me? Just go learn about television, and go learn about movies, and go learn about the history. What's film noir, and how did the sitcom come to be, and what did Desi Arnaz contribute to the industry, and do all that shit. And if you ever go to LA, don't go see the new shit. Go on a tour that shows you how it all started. That's what you can do for me. That would be something.
And by the way, start off with like History of Sitcom, which is, I believe, streaming on Max right now, if I'm not mistaken, all 8 episodes. Yeah. It really is a love letter to these things that I just grew up loving so much. But if you want to study history, I would say start there and work your way down, because usually what happens when you watch these things, it sends you down a rabbit hole. And we have so much information at our fingertips that you're going to find yourself in some really interesting little territories that's going to give a breath of fresh air to something in a world right now that seems potentially so dark, when there are so many great things out there that we can consume to battle the negativity that is out there right now. But Marshall J. Kaplan, I hope to talk to you again. Honestly, this was just so great for me. I really appreciate your time today.
Likewise, Ryan. It really was, like you said, it was a breath of fresh air. The world is a dark place, and pop culture and all of this stuff we love is our comfort food to our souls. So it's really been awesome talking to you, and no bullshit. If I'm in LA, I'm going to stalk you. We're going to go out somewhere. We're going to hang, and that'll be it.
Would love it. We'll talk to you next time.
All right, buddy.